All right, everybody, good afternoon, and just welcome on this beautiful, beautiful sunny day here in California. We are recording live from sunny Sacramento, California, so please help us welcome with a great round of applause to help us kick off today's webinar, one of HCD's fearless leader, Miss Rebecca Weber.
Thank you, Bethany. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Portfolio Reinvestment Program 2023 Notice of Funding Availability webinar. I am Rebecca Weber. I'm the section chief who oversees the PRP program. Next slide. A few reminders before we begin this presentation. This presentation will be recorded, and by continuing in this meeting, you are consenting to be recorded. Please keep your microphone muted and hold all verbal questions and comments until the end of the presentation. However, you may submit questions during the presentation in the Q&A feature of Zoom, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. And a copy of the presentation will be posted on the HC website shortly. Please note, we will be recording the Q&A session of the presentation, but that portion will not be posted on the website. Here is today's presentation team. I would also like to add a special thank you to Holly, Cecilia, Gabby, Stephanie, and Bethany for all their work behind the scenes. And thank you to Lindy Suggs, our branch chief, for all her patience and support of the PRP program. Next slide. Today's agenda will be an in-depth review of the 2023 PRP NOFA, and will include a questions and answer period at the end of the presentation. I will now turn it over to Doug Gongleware. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Doug Gongleware, and I'm a representative here at the PRP program. And I'll be starting off today giving you a brief overview of the PRP program. The potential conversion of affordable housing to market rate housing is an ongoing and critical statewide problem. Some housing projects secured with department loans are reaching the end of their affordability periods and are at risk of converting to market rate housing. So the purpose of PRP is to decrease the risk of conversion to market rate housing by extending the remaining useful life of the project and continuing the long-term affordability period of these department-funded housing projects by making available project loans for project rehabilitation and to capitalize operating reserves. There will be approximately $112 million available for the 2023 NOFA. Authorizing legislation. So PRP originated from Assembly Bill 140, which was approved by Governor Newsom on July 19th of 2021. Assembly Bill 140 created the statutory basis for PRP by adding it to the Health and Safety Code. Last year, Governor Newsom signed Senate Bill 101, the Budget Act of 2023, which appropriated funds for this NOFA. The Health and Safety Code allows the department to adopt guidelines for PRP. The 2023 PRP NOFA serves as the department's guidelines for administration of the PRP program. PRP guidelines also incorporates the June 19th of 2019 MHP guidelines and the November 15th, 2017 Uniform Multifamily Regulations. In the event of any conflict between any of this NOFA and the MHP guidelines or the UMRs, the provisions of the 2023 PRP NOFA are controlling. Next slide. So some key changes to the 2023 NOFA include eligibility is now extended to those legacy programs that had not had a substantial rehabilitation done in the past 15 years. Those legacy programs are CalDAP, California Natural Disaster Assistance Program, SHRP, the Special User Housing Rehabilitation Program, RHCPO, Rental Housing Construction Program Original, the DPRLP, Deferred Payment Rehabilitation Loan Program, CHIRP, California Housing Rehabilitation Program, FHDP, the Family Housing Demonstration Program, and RHCP Bond, the Rental Housing Construction Program with the bond component. Each sponsor is limited to submitting applications for 2 different projects, but this does not include applications submitted under the small project set-asides. Low-income housing tax credits can now be used as a funding source. And now, construction commencement must occur within 12 months from the date of the PRP award, and 18 months for those projects utilizing tax credits as a funding source. So timelines. So the NOFA and the application have already been released, but here are some key dates for the 2023 PRP NOFA application period. The application over-the-counter period commences March 28, 2024, and expires May 28th of 2024. Another change this year is that there will be staggering deadlines. If you want to apply under a set-aside, the applications are due no later than 4 p.m. on April 29th. If you're going to be applying under the general pool, then you'll have until 4 p.m. on May 28th to submit a complete PRP application. Awards will be announced continuously as applications are approved and approximately 4 to 5 months after the application submittal, but no later than December 31st of 2024. Lastly, I'll now speak to you all on eligible projects. In order to be eligible for a PRP award, the project must currently have an original HCD loan recorded on the property and must meet all the following additional requirements. All HCD regulatory agreements have expired on or will expire on or before December 31st of 2023, except for those projects that were foreclosed upon by the department or another public lender, as well as those projects that obtained only a loan extension that were not awarded additional funding for a substantial rehabilitation under the Housing Loan Conversion Program or the Loan Portfolio Restructuring Program, and as well as those projects funded under the HCD legacy programs, which had not undergone a substantial rehabilitation in the past 15 years, as previously mentioned. In addition, projects which had not previously received a first round PRP award, so none of the 29 awarded projects from round 1 are eligible. The HCD regulatory agreement has not been terminated, nor has the HCD loan been paid off. The development sources and the uses budget included in the application demonstrates that the project's rehabilitation costs can be funded and also validates the need for a PRP loan. The sources and uses must also demonstrate that the development budget is fully funded for the rehabilitation costs as is submitted. The application demonstrates that the project has construction period rehabilitation financing provided by another lender, and this is going to be evidenced by a letter of interest or a commitment letter and acceptable to the department in its sole discretion. The sponsor has sufficient financial capacity to fund all required pre-development expenses prior to construction close. The project must comply with the definition of a rental housing development and consist of 5 or more units. Additionally, eligible projects may not comprise of 2 or more sites unless the original HCD loan is already secured on each of those sites. No new scattered site projects. And once again, each sponsor is limited to submitting applications for 2 different projects. This does not include any applications submitted under the small project set-aside. And I'll now turn it over to Lynn Nguyen.
Thank you, Doug. My name is Lynn Nguyen, and the first section I'll be covering is eligible sponsors and applicants. Now, the applicant must be an eligible sponsor as described as an individual, a joint venture, partnership, limited partnership, trust, corporation, limited liability company, a local public entity or tribal entity, or any combination thereof, and an eligible sponsor may be organized on a for-profit, limited profit, or nonprofit basis. An eligible sponsor shall not be in breach or default of the original HCD loan or any other department program, except for maturity of an unpaid loan. And you must be current with payments due to HCD and mandatory reporting, including the schedule of rental income and financial statements. If the applicant is not the current owner of the project, the current owner must complete the following steps. You must request the department's approval of a change of ownership no less than 30 days prior to the submittal of your PRP application. And the department must issue a formal written approval of that change of the ownership prior to the PRP application being submitted. The current owner must provide evidence that the transaction complies with preservation notice law as stated in Government Code Section 65863.11 and/or .13. And the applicant must have site control in compliance with the UMRs. New owner capacity. Now, in order to be eligible for funding, if the applicant is not the current owner of the project, the applicant must demonstrate experience relevant to owning and developing affordable rental housing by demonstrating capacity. This includes financial resources, an office, payroll, and all of the additional requirements, which is successful ownership, development of affordable rental housing within the most recent 10 years, employment of a staff with demonstrated experience of owning and developing affordable rental housing. Evidence of the project and proposed transaction complies with preservation notice law requirements. The next section I will be covering will be eligible uses of funds. PRP funds shall be used only for eligible costs that are incurred on the project as approved by the department. And this actually includes rehabilitation work to extend the life of the project through the end of the PRP loan term, and environmental hazard reports, surveys, investigations, building permits, and state and local fees. Now, the complete list of eligible uses of PRP funds can be found in the notebook. PRP funds may not be used for any of the following uses: creating new units, to support non-residential units or uses, paying off any existing HCD loans or any other debt. No new construction of any type is permitted, and this also includes accessory structures. Now, the department reserves the right to disallow costs that do not constitute reasonable project costs as determined by the department. And the last section I'll cover is the threshold requirement. Submittal of a complete PRP application by the application deadline using unaltered application forms and including all required attachments, adhering to submittal protocols and compliance with the requirements specified in this notebook. You must demonstrate readiness to commence rehabilitation within 1 year of award or 18 months if you're utilizing tax credits, including a commitment or a letter of interest from a lender for the construction period rehabilitation funds. And commencement of rehabilitation means the first alteration of any wall, ceiling, floor, or other structural part of the building. Submittal of a property condition assessment that was prepared by a third party within 12 months of the application. Submittal date and documents all physical needs and all repairs required within 5 years of the date of the PCA. All identified repairs required within 5 years of the PCA must be included in the rehabilitation scope of work submitted with the application. You must demonstrate fiscal integrity as stated in the MHP guidelines by the 10th year after the date of recordation of the PRP rehabilitation loan. You must demonstrate compliance with the debt service coverage ratio as stated in the UMRs. and each applicant shall submit an authorizing resolution that is acceptable to the department and is legally sufficient. In addition, each applicant shall submit a complete set of its organizational documents and all amendments. HCD will not approve a PRP standard agreement until it receives a complete set of authorizing, formational, and organizational documents from the applicant. And any applicant that has misrepresented any material facts related to the sponsor's compliance with any of the department's loans or the sponsor's PRP application will be grounds for ineligibility for the PRP award. Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Michelle Lyon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Lyon. I will be going over the rent and affordability rules. First, we will be going over projects with AMI-based rent. Projects that are currently using Area Median Income or AMI-based rent that were funded by programs such as HOME, CERNA, or extended through LPR will continue to use the published AMI rents. If the project does not comply with fiscal integrity due to an extremely low designation required by the 9% tax credits, PRP will allow redesignating a sufficient number of units to 50% AMI to meet fiscal integrity. For units that were not originally assigned, the sponsor may choose to make the units PRP assisted and may set those units at any AMI level up to a maximum of 60% of AMI. Now for projects with formula-based rents. Projects shall convert to AMI-based rent and income limits under the PRP regulatory agreement, except for home projects, CERNA projects, or other projects that have already converted to AMI-based rents. Projects under HLCP or LPR, there's no change to the rent rules that will apply. The AMI-based rent and income limits for assisted units will be restricted by a specific AMI level as follows. Units designated in the original HCD loan regulatory agreement as low income will be set at or below 60% of AMI in the PRP regulatory agreement. Units originally designated as very low income will be set at or below 30% of AMI. However, if the project does not achieve fiscal integrity, with all very low income units redesignated at 30% of AMI, the department may redesignate a sufficient number of units at 50% of AMI in order to meet fiscal integrity. For units that were not originally assisted, the sponsor may choose to make the units PRP assisted and may set those units at any AMI level up to a maximum of 60% of AMI. In counties where 100% of AMI under the current multifamily tax subsidy project income limits are equal to the current statewide non-metro median income, sponsors may designate up to 20% of assisted units that were designated in the original HCD loan regulatory agreement as low income at 80% of AMI in the PRP regulatory agreement. The PRP application will identify the counties that are eligible for the 80% designation. Now let's talk about increases. The sponsor may implement the rent increases only after the PRP regulatory agreement is recorded. For existing tenants with household incomes that do not exceed 35% of AMI, annual rent increases are capped at 5%. Existing tenants with incomes greater than 35% of AMI, annual rent increases are capped at 10% for the purposes of the PRP loan. If an existing tenant's rent is or reaches 50% or more of the tenant's household income, no rent increases are permitted. However, when the existing tenant's income increases sufficiently that their rent is below 50% of their household income as identified at time of annual income recertification, their rent can continue to increase as specified in the PRP NOFA. Assisted units that are vacant or become vacant after the PRP application is submitted shall be charged rents in accordance with the original HCD loan until the PRP regulatory agreement is recorded. The rules governing annual rent increases will continue until an existing tenant's rent reaches the rent limit for the AMI requirement for the existing tenant's unit, as updated annually and posted on the department's website. Once an existing tenant's rent reaches the published rent limit for that unit, the unit's rent will be restricted solely by the published AMI based rent and will no longer be subject to the 5 or 10% rent increase rules. After the unit converts to the AMI based rent, there is no evaluation or prohibition concerning whether the existing tenant's rent increases 50% of the tenant's household income. Tenant's rent exceeds 50% of the tenant's household income. The rent can increase according to the published AMI based rent and income limit each year. The rent rules for over-income tenants. Existing tenants with household incomes that exceed 80% of AMI will be required to pay 30% of their actual household income for rent after proper noticing is provided to the tenant. Tenants who move into the project after the PRP application is submitted and whose incomes increase to more than 60% of AMI after the PRP regulatory agreement is recorded will be required to pay 30% of their actual household income for rent after proper noticing is provided to that tenant. Prior to the implementation of the first rent increases under PRP, the applicant must provide the existing tenants with the following notification of rent increases. A notice 6 months prior to the rent increase with an estimate of the amount of the increase. A notice 90 days prior to the actual rent increase with the exact amount of the new rent. Rent notices may be further governed by other funding sources, other state or local, in which case the most restrictive requirements will apply. Thank you. Now I'd like to hand it over to Gwen Drury.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. Hello, everybody. My name is Gwen Drury, and I am a representative here at HCD, and I'm going to share with you today about the COSER and funding amounts. So let's start with the Capitalized Operating Subsidy Reserve, also known as COSER. The purpose of the COSER is to address project operating deficits associated with assisted units and is only available in conjunction with the PRP rehabilitation loan. The COSER funds will be dispersed annually and must be fully expended by December 31st, 2028. The total COSER funding amount will be the lesser of 25% of the PRP rehabilitation loan or the amount needed to pay anticipated operating deficits attributable to the assisted units from construction loan closing through December 31st, 2028. The department may allow any remaining COSER funds to be deposited into the project operating reserve at the end of the COSER term. Now, in determining the operating deficit amount, the department shall consider individual project factors, including, but not limited to, the following: operating deficit, which means negative operating income after payment of approved operating expenses, required reserve deposits, and mandatory debt service, including any HCD approved operating reserve deposits and mandatory debt service. The annual escalators are set at the amounts listed unless another funding source of any other evidence supports a different escalator amount. Anticipated assisted unit rents shall be calculated with a 2.5% annual escalator. Anticipated project vacancy rates shall be calculated at 5%. And the prior fiscal year's HCD approved operating expenses at 3.5%. Now, an initial COSER disbursement may be advanced at construction close based on the department's review and approval of the first year operating deficit attributable to assisted units. Subsequent disbursements will be reviewed during the review of the project's prior year audited financial statements,
The COSR may be adjusted to reconcile any prior over-dispersed or under-dispersed amounts. If the department determines that the project did not need as much from the COSR as was previously dispersed, the department may reduce the amount of COSR payments in the subsequent year or require the project to return the excess COSR amount. The final reconciliation will be based on the department's review and approval of the project's audited income statements on forms provided by the department covering the period from the first day of the fiscal year through December 31st, 2028. The final reconciliation will be based on the operating deficit attributable to the assisted units as determined from the department's review and approval of the project's audited income statement covering the fiscal year in which the COSR term ends. The COSR expenditure deadline is December 31st, 2028. If after review of the project's audit, the department determines the project did not need as much from the COSR as previously dispersed, the department may allow the remaining COSR funds to be deposited into the project's operating reserve, but the department must provide written approval. If the project meets the requirements of the PRP rehabilitation loan and complies with the PRP COSR requirements, the COSR portion of the loan will be forgiven. Now, let's get to the fun part, the funding amounts. That's everybody's fun part. Approximately $112 million is available under the 2023 PRP NOFA. There are 3 set-asides in the NOFA. There's $10 million set aside for small projects, which are defined as having from 5 to 20 units. $25 million set aside for residential hotels, and $25 million set aside for projects that have been foreclosed on by the department or by another public lender. If the set-asides are not fully utilized by the set-aside application deadline of April 29th, the remaining funds will be made available to the general funding pool. Now, the maximum assisted unit and per project caps, not including the COSR reward, are as follows. $250,000 for each assisted unit that is restricted at 60% of AMI or less, except for assisted units under the MTSP income limits. $25 million maximum per project. Now, projects that are under the maximum per project loan limit for the general pool, residential hotels set aside, and foreclosure set aside may qualify for additional funding if they have any of the following high cost expenses: temporary or permanent relocation, elevator replacement or repair, seismic work, structural work, required environmental remediation, accessibility modifications. In no event may the loan amount, including the applicable increases, exceed the $25 million for projects in the general pool and residential hotels set aside and the foreclosure set aside. And now I'd like to hand over the remaining of this presentation to Joan Carnego.
Good afternoon. My name is Joan Carnego. I will begin by discussing the rehabilitation loan and the application. The PRP project rehabilitation loans are for permanent financing and permanent loan conversion as evidenced by the recordation of the PRP loan documents. The PRP loan will bear simple interest of 3% per year on the unpaid principal balance. There is an annual loan payment in the amount of 0.42% of the original principal balance. This required loan payment is the monitoring fee and is due every year for the term of the regulatory agreement, regardless of any prepayment or repayment of the PRP loan. For projects funded through the small project set aside, the minimum loan term is 30 years, and for all other projects, the loan term is 50 years. 55 years, excuse me. The application, the PRP program is an over-the-counter process. Complete applications will be evaluated on a first-come, first-served basis. The department will evaluate applications for compliance with the program requirements set forth in the PRP NOFA. Incomplete PRP applications will be deemed ineligible, lose prioritization, and will need to be resubmitted. Key NOFA deadlines and dates. To begin with, please make sure that your PRP application and all required supporting documents are uploaded and submitted through the department's online application portal by the application deadline. Again, the deadline for set aside applications is April 29th, 2024. The deadline for general pool applicants is May 28th, 2024. Award announcements will be made continuously, but no later than December 31st, 2024. Construction will commence within 12 months of the award letter or 18 months if utilizing tax credits. Additional resources that you may find helpful are included here. The PRP website can be located through HCD's website and entering PRP in the search bar, or you can write down the link on the screen. On PRP's website, you will find the PRP NOFA in the application, templates, including templates for resolutions and loan documents, webinars and frequently asked questions. This webinar will be posted shortly. MHP final guidelines, UMR regulations, and reporting and compliance requirements and forms. Additionally, preservation notice law has changed substantially effective January 1, 2021. You can access additional information on the Housing Policy and Development's website listed below. Or if you have additional questions, you may email preservation@hcd.ca.gov or call the phone number listed. Additionally, if you have additional questions, please email the PRP team at portfolioreinvestment@hcd.ca.gov. Here is the team. We appreciate your patience and attendance today. We will now open it up for questions. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand or type them in the chat.
And this portion now concludes the actual presentation, of course, of the Portfolio Reinvestment Program.